going to work without a microphone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So Susie asked me to come up and begin this because we might have some visitors here, and just do my usual about the good news here at the Southampton campus. And so if you have heard this before, okay. I went from seeing you to not seeing you. Bear with me. Some of you may know we had a press conference on campus yesterday at the Windmill that the town has put forward a rezoning proposal that will ensure that the campus will remain connected with higher education. I thought this was probably not necessary. Stony Brook is I'm convinced they're very committed to following through their plans for us, but of course it couldn't hurt to have it zoned in such a way that will help ensure that. And also from the tone of the press conference, we are finally getting, turning the page on some of the other stories and moving forward. And I think in the coming weeks and months there will be a series of exciting announcements. The future of the campus will primarily be with marine science, with graduate arts, what we are doing, and then eventually some medicine and health education, and I think it will have a wonderful symmetry. We'll have marine science interested in supporting life, and a hospital trying to extend life, and then the arts programs making life worth living. We have the central role. We are also, starting next fall, reintroducing undergraduate education in the form of these semesters by the sea. You've seen those advertised elsewhere. That will have a nice synergy with our creative writing program. You also know about our expanding our summer programs and adding visual arts, our new MFA in theater. There will be another announcement at some point late spring, early summer about in film, about some things that are kind of underway in terms of taking our MFA in theater and film and separating the film off to a separate program. We're excited about that. There are, I guess the next announcement that will come will have to do with construction, and this is kind of off the record. It hasn't been publicly announced, but they will begin construction on a new marine station, a beautiful facility down the water, and that will be exciting. And so there are many signs of strength, and we of course are prepared to, with our program for graduate arts, to be at the center of all of it and really make this community and this campus proud of what we're doing. So, speaking of being proud of what we're doing, I want to bring up the person who has made this series so special this term. She also is going to be teaching a fiction class this coming fall, and I think it's already, I think it was first oversubscribed for us, which I hope she will not come up here and gloat because of that. But please welcome the wonderful Susie Merrill.
Do I need this? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just have a few quick announcements, which I'm going to have to take off my glasses to. The TSR, the Southampton Review's submissions period is now open through May 31st, and please, please, please submit online through our new electronic submissions program, which you can find at the Southampton Review website. The MFA reading is on May 2nd, and if you have not read before and you're a graduate student actively in the program, please email me about finding a spot. And next week we'll have the novelist Joshua Henkin here. He's the author of several books, including a book called Matrimony, which is quite wonderful, and he has a new novel coming out in June, and I'm not sure. He might read from that or from Matrimony, so either way, I definitely think you should come. And tonight, I'm so excited to be introducing these two gentlemen. Dan Menaker, who we all know and love, a former New Yorker fiction editor, former editor-in-chief of Random House, and now a beloved faculty member, and our new friend, Larry Kirshbaum, who has been many things in publishing that we will hear about tonight, including head of Warner Books, and now is the director of the shocking and fascinating to all of us Amazon Books imprint. So please join me in welcoming both of them.
thank you, Susie. Thank you, Bob, and welcome, Larry. Although, as East Ender, I feel like he's a native here. And I'm going to just ask him some questions about what he does, because what he does is new. And it's like people have made various stabs in this direction over the last 10 years, including Larry himself. Sorry. But this seems bigger, more important, and more real. And so what I thought I would do is start by asking you, what did you do yesterday when you came to work, when you went to work? What did you do?
I had a cup of coffee. Just like to say, it's great to be here. It's a wonderful setting. It's like a living room with an incredible view that you don't get in New York City, that's for sure. And I just want to thank Mr. Bob. As we now call, as I learned. He, by the way, is a former author of mine. And today, if he had not chosen to build this wonderful program, he could be the author of The Hunger Games. There's no telling where his career might have gone.
And
Exciting prospect.
Hollywood's loss is Stony Brook's gain, I guess. A typical day, it's really not terribly exciting, so I don't want to dwell on this, but it's mostly making a to-do list and then finding out that you don't get through any of it because you're basically putting out fires through most of the day. Phone calls are coming in, editors are bidding on books, or we're looking at manuscripts. We have a lot of, because Amazon is based in Seattle, we do a lot of conference calling in order to sort of keep up with what's going on with the mothership. And of course their hours are a little bit different, so my morning is actually the calmest time because Seattle doesn't really open until about 9 o'clock in the morning, which is noon. But then late in the day, of course, they're just getting revved up and I want to go home. But so sometimes I do go home and have dinner, and then we have more calls into the night. It's a very intense environment, but it's a lot of fun because I love books. And the one thing that I think I should explain is, despite the fact that Amazon is a very large company, as you all know, especially on the retailing side, we're really a very small publisher. We're a startup. We only have about, Dan was visiting our offices the other day, we have about 20, 25 people. It's a very intimate group. We have offices kind of arranged around a sort of a bullpen area. And it's a small publisher, and we, in a lot of ways, are operating it as a small publishing house. We of course have this enormous marketing capability because of our websites and stores and our database and all that, which we are trying to use to innovative ends to publish books well. We start in the fall with our first list, and but we are a small publisher. We're not that different. I like to model it on the companies that I worked for many years, Warner and Little Brown. They were basically both run as essentially small houses with a lot of bestsellers, of course, but also a lot of quality books. And I love books. I'm happy reading. That's my wife says to me. She's a big gardener out here, of course. And she says to me, "You'd rather read about gardening or cooking than do it." And I'm afraid that's true. I'm kind of a real couch potato. And of course, these new reading devices like the Kindle, get a little plug in there. You know, they are a reader's dream, because if I decide I want to read Dan Menaker's book, which I just bought, by the way, and you better all do the same thing on your way out. You just download it, and you click, 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 and 30 seconds later you've got it. And so, although I do still love bookstores and spend a lot of time, I love the Hampton bookstores, in fact. But it's a real reader's delight to be able to just get a book inside of a minute and just start reading it because maybe you read a review or whatever. So I'm just books day and night, and that's what I love.
you mentioned your first list in the fall. I'm curious how many books you'll be publishing and what some of them are.
I thought you'd never ask. All right. I didn't think we were going to get there that fast, but I actually am proud of this, and if you don't mind, if you'll just indulge me here for 1 minute.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're here. I'll just sort of awkward.
Can I hold your mic for you while you're
Okay,
operating
that's
the
very
paper?
kind of you. Thank you. Okay. But, I mean, here, I'll just run through it for you, just what the books that we're doing. It sort of gives you a feel. The first, I'm not going to do the whole editorial presentation, much as I'd love to. The first book, probably our biggest book, most well-known, is called The 4-Hour Chef by Timothy Ferriss. He's a best-selling author. He's done a series of 4-hour books that have been on the bestseller list. And the idea here is you can become a gourmet chef. You can go from burning scrambled eggs to making deluxe French meals in 4 hours or less. It's really he wanders all over the place, but his whole philosophy is self-learning and don't be intimidated by experts. You can be an expert. Then we're doing a series. This is going to be a lot of fun and I think very intellectually interesting, called Amazon Lives. It's edited by a fellow named James Atlas, who's a very, very fine editor. And we are signing up, these are short biographies. They tend to run about 25,000 words by very distinguished authors. We've got Phoebe Hoban writing on Lucian Freud. We've got Jay Perini writing on Jesus, etc. It's going to be a very high quality list and very exciting books. We have the Chopra brothers. Some of you probably know Deepak Chopra, but it turns out his brother, Sanjeev, is the dean of the Harvard Medical School. So this is a story of the two brothers as immigrants. Deepak published his first book as a self-published author. We'll get into self-publishing, in which I totally believe. And it's a great brother story, a great immigrant story, and two very different but fascinating brothers. Then we have a book that we can all relate to called My Mother Was Nuts. So I can certainly relate to that. By Penny Marshall, who is one of the foremost women executives, actresses. You may remember her from Laverne and Shirley. And she is, of course, has been a director, actress, and so on. Also a rabid basketball fan, as I've learned. And this is her story. It's a sort of a Nora Ephron kind of view of her mother and growing up. She comes from the Bronx and is now, of course, in Hollywood. Then we have Hillbilly Heart by Billy Ray Cyrus. This is a very interesting story. Billy Ray, as he says, was an ugly duckling yearning for a purpose. And of course, he became a very famous songwriter, performer. He's now, of course, he's also the father of Miley Cyrus. And he's got a great story to tell. It's a real rags to riches, a lot of stumbles along the way. But this is the kind of book that does very, very well in the heartland of America. And I've always liked the idea, coming from Chicago, that we publish for the whole country. We don't just publish for New York. We have a book called Elimination Night, which is a sort of by anonymous, he does not want to disclose. It's about what goes on behind the scenes at a TV reality show, and it's very, very funny and somewhat a little touch of cynicism there. Very entertaining. Then we have a book called Why Have Kids by Jessica Valenti, which is actually, she's a feminist, but this is really both sides of the story. This is not, she has a daughter, so this is not don't have kids, but it's really the truth about what you should be thinking about if you are pondering having kids.
You should think hard in case you don't want your kids to grow up and write Why My Mother Was Nuts. You should publish them as companion.
My take on this is, don't have the kids, have the grandkids first. You know, as they always say, what is it that the kids and the grandparents all agree is that they're, the parents are very effed up, you know, that's sort of the way it goes. Then we have a book called Outside In, which is a business book looking at the whole idea that you have to organize your company so that it's customer obsessed, which happens as, I mean, coincidentally, honestly, this is the whole Amazon philosophy, is customer, customer, customer. Get the book there within 24 or 48 hours and make sure it's packed right, etc. This is how you organize your whole company. It's by a group from the Forrester Research. Then a more literary title called For a Song and 100 Songs by Liao Yu, who is a poet, a Chinese poet, exiled, writing about the experiences that he had going back to Tiananmen Square. And then last, but well, a couple more, I guess. This is a book that we actually put out in paperback called Jeff, One Lonely Guy. Jeff put up signs around, posters around New York saying, if you're lonely, please call me. And he got hundreds and hundreds of responses, as well as emails and so on, people telling their stories. And we put this out as a paperback, written by, along with a fellow named David Shields and Michael Logan, about the sort of the interplay of people talking about loneliness and what it's like to be lonely in New York and so on. But it's actually in some ways very depressing, but also very inspiring, because it makes the point that, in part, that being lonely, sometimes being single, being lonely, whatever, has its values in terms of self-discovery. And then I'll just do one more, The Rise of Superman. This is about peak performance kind of individuals and how they are in effect rearranging our planet. This is the kind of a conjunction of biology, technology, psychology, spirituality, how these super achievers, you know, climbing, scaling mountains without ropes and all this sort of stuff, how they are leading our race in a very interesting evolutionary direction. And then I'll just mention one other title. I don't think I have it here, but it's one of my favorites. It's a novel, and it's called The Care of Wooden Floors. It's a British novel, and the great thing about it is, you know, I always think of Home Depot when I think of this, but it's about a fellow who goes to house sit somebody, and the only instructions are, whatever you do, don't damage my wooden floors, because they are perfect and polyurethaned and they shine like, you know, silver pennies, whatever. And so, instead of silver dollars, I'm sorry. So, I've got to be very, very precise here with Mr. Menaker. This man is very, very literate and also a pro at the art of conversation. You know, this is like playing tennis with McEnroe or Nadal,
McEnroe,
right, or something like that. I don't know if you're a lefty or a righty, but in any case. So what happens in this Care of Wooden Floors is, of course, he spills a little red wine on the floor, and then he tries to fix it. And then, you know, the whole thing goes completely haywire. So
That is so sort of, I won't say stolen, but I will say makes use of a famous scene.
Thank you so much.
Famous scene in Lucky Jim.
Good job. That just sort of gives you an idea. It's a range, some celebrity stuff, a lot of novels. I didn't get a chance to talk. I mean, I don't want to make this a sales presentation, much as I'd love to. A lot of novels, and so all of you novelists out there, we're open for business, and I think that that's going to be, literary novels are probably going to be our real mainstay.
See, that's like the Lonely Jeff guy,
Yeah.
inviting people to call.
Right.
You're going to get so many.
Right. He wasn't so lonely after that. I mean, so.
How did you give? Tell me a little bit about how these books were acquired. Is it by the way, I've been in Larry's office, in the offices, and I'll say, I've never been in a more sort of welcomingly bare bones, sort of to the point office. There's nothing up on the walls yet, and in a way, I suppose they have to put maybe book jackets up there.
Well, we will. We don't have any books jackets yet.
But there's something really wonderfully basic about the way you're working. I was very impressed with with the atmosphere. I know a couple of the people, or 2 or 3 of the people who've already decided to work for Amazon. One in Seattle, one in New York. They're wonderful people. But I want to talk about the acquisition process. Is it exactly the same as it would have been when you were in the other arm of this business?
Yeah, it really is. Most of the submissions, I think virtually all, come in from agents, and we have different people tend to cover different areas. We have one editor who is really responsible for business books. We have one editor who is doing literary fiction. We all kind of work together on the celebrity type books. And we have one editor who's tending to do more cookbook, self-help. And depending on who gets the submission, or sometimes they just come in over the transom from agents, we divvy it up. And then we meet once a week for an editorial meeting. We sit in this little conference room that we have. Our marketing people join us because we like to consider the whole arc of the publication process. We like to know how we're going to publish the book down the road. And we go around, and it's a square table. We just go around, and each person talks about the books that they really are interested in. And then we sort of winnow it down in a kind of a consensus way. We have an editor-in-chief, Julia Chaffetz, who came to us from HarperCollins, and we sort of triage it, what books we really want to go after. And then we look into our databases to see how, either if the author has been published before, how the earlier books have done in the Amazon store. We also get Nielsen data, which is available, and then so we get a feel, and also we look at the general subject area. If it's, let's say, a business book on innovation, we look at other books on innovation that have been published, say, in the last couple of years, to get some sense of how they've been selling. And also, our business editor knows a lot of these books, so he knows the slant on them, see if we have something that's really unique here. And then we make a judgment, and we do go to Seattle for approval before we make an offer, but and so we fill out a little P&L form, profit and loss form, based on what we think we can sell, and what it will cost, the production cost, and so on. And then we call the agent up. Sometimes, if the author is really hot, the agent runs an auction. I assume you know how all that works. It's a telephone auction, and we then participate. If it's a book that has not been widely circulated, or maybe we have been given it exclusively, we make what's called a preemptive offer to encourage the agent to buy the book. To sell us the book without going to auction or without involving other publishers.
Do you give them the 24 or 48-hour time limit?
Well, yeah. We would like to hear back. Obviously, if you make a preemptive offer, the general procedure for something like that is that you're expecting to hear back within 24 hours if the author accepts or not. But if the author happens to be in Fiji or something, it isn't going to be back for a week, but then we have to wait. So it's pretty much the same process that we followed when I was dealing with Little Brown or dealing with Warner. One of the great things about it is the collaborative effort. I have never been a big believer in top-down management. I don't think it works. It certainly doesn't work in publishing. I have enormous respect for my colleagues. On many titles, I go with their judgment much more than I would go with my own, because they have it. I think, especially if it's a book that's aimed primarily at women, I certainly rely more heavily on our women editors, who happen to be the majority anyway. If it's a suspense book, I would probably trust myself more, but I still want to hear what the others say. If it's a trend, kind of a pop cult book like this, or a book like Why I Have Kids, I look to women who are in the childbearing age to see how they would react. Obviously, it's pretty much common sense, and it's a collaborative kind of process. No one person makes a decision like that. If it feels right and we think we can publish it well, we will go after it. Often we will say, you know, we love the book, but we don't think we can publish it in the right way, so we will let it go. And it's, you know, it's a kind of a flow. And when you're flowing right, the books work. You know, I think the great publishing houses, and Dan knows this firsthand because he you know, ran one of them. It's a kind of a as I say it's really a kind of a flow. It isn't the way corporations. It certainly isn't the way Mad Men is portrayed. That's for sure. It's kind of a group of people who are passionate about books and passionate about certain subjects. And I have always said I'd rather have one person who is really passionate about a book than 7 people sitting around the table who are lukewarm. You know, I always hate when I hear somebody say, well, I didn't really like it, but I can see why it would sell. You know, I want somebody to step up and say, I love this book. I would lie down on the tracks for this book. And I'll tell you one example in my own career when I was still involved with Little Brown 5 or 6 years ago. This novel came in. It was a vampire novel. It was written by a housewife from the West Coast, and it was about this young woman and this relationship she had with this vampire, and it was very sensuous, but no sex. He didn't want to, you know, he didn't want to infect her with his bite. And I thought to myself, this is, you know, I don't get this book. This is, you know, what's going on here? And there was one, bless her heart, one editor-in-chief of Little Brown Children named Megan Tingley, and she said, you don't know what the hell you're talking about or thinking about. You've got to buy this book. You know, and actually there were 3 of them. It was fairly expensive, and I said, okay.
Who was the agent?
Okay.
May I ask?
Huh?
Who was the agent?
The agent was a writer's house, Amy Burkauer. And she's a tough cookie too, and she thought she had the Holy Grail, which as it turned out she did. But we had a huge fight on the contract, and I almost, you know, I wanted to, you know, oh my God. I said, what are you doing? Nobody's heard of this author. It's 3 books. It's a big 6-figure number. You know, and then of course I make some stupid statement like, does anybody care about vampires? So there it goes. And so I said, okay. And of course we bought it, and, you know, a couple of $100 million in sales later, there it was. So you really learn to respect your colleagues. And one of the fun things, actually, I know this may seem silly, but one of the fun things about our business is sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. You know? And I remember, for example, we had published Mitch Albom, who's done some sports books, because I went to Michigan, and he's based in Detroit. He'd done some sports books with us on University of Michigan, figures, heroes, etc. So then he comes in with this proposal about this professor, aging professor at Brandeis, who's dying, and he goes to visit him every Tuesdays. And I said to Mitch, I read this proposal. I said, very, very depressing. And I said to Mitch, you know, famous. This is, I think, my epitaph. Stick to sports, Mitch. So Mitch, he stuck to sports, all right, in the Free Press, writing in the Detroit. But he took his book to Doubleday. And so the next thing I know, this is like, you talk about your mother was nuts. As it happened, my mother passed away the fall of, it was 97, when this book comes out. And so as the Jewish custom, I'm sitting Shiva the first night for, you know, after her death, and literally 4 people show up with this little book neatly wrapped to make me feel so good. And of course, it's Tuesdays with Boris. So I said, you got me, Mom. You were really having fun up there. You know. So, you know, it's really humbling that, you know, afterwards, you know, hindsight is 20/20, but at the time, you have to make your decision. And sometimes you're right, and sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you hit the ball out of the park, and sometimes you strike out.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that in my experience with acquisitions and even writing books and having a lot to do with other writers when I was at the New Yorker, that the average I hear various kinds of statistics that most books fail economically. Sometimes I've heard 3 out of 4, sometimes I've heard 4 out of 5, in terms of turning a profit for the publisher who publishes them. Can you talk about the accuracy of that? Someone, I mean, recently, someone you know very well, I'm not going to tell you who it is, because you won't like it.
It wasn't my wife, was
no,
it?
no, you don't know him that well. Said he thought it was really more like that in terms of a return on the advance, that it was more like 1 in 8 books, and this is a really reputable, sound publisher, really returns on the investment of the advance. Do you
Well, I think we did better than that. We used to say if you can hit 1 out of 3, you get in the Baseball Hall of Fame. So if you can do 1 out of 3 that really do well, they can make up for books that do less well. But we published, I've always published relatively small lists. So our percentage was higher. And in a lot of cases, you're building authors. And, one of the things that I'm proudest of in terms of my career was the number of authors that I worked with over a long period of time who grew. Because let's face it, not every author comes out of the box. First book does well. In some cases, first book doesn't sell all that well, but if you're committed to the author and the writing, you stay with it, and maybe by book 3 you built something. And there are dozens of cases. If you talk about popular writers, for example, somebody like John Grisham, his first book sold 4,000 or 5,000 copies at Time to Kill, and then his agent came around with this thing, that wound up selling, millions and millions of copies. We didn't publish him, unfortunately, but that's the business. I don't think that 1 out of 8 is not possible. I think the big problem that publishers have is in this kind of auction fever that develops on brand name authors, where the price just goes very, very high, and it is hard to earn back and make a profit. But our philosophy, certainly our philosophy with respect to Amazon, is going to be to publish across a broad spectrum and to do a lot of books that are discovery books. They're probably not going to have huge advances, but we're going to put a lot of marketing money into it and really publish them. I think my main lament about publishing has always been, both as a publisher and then as an agent, is so many books come out and nobody knows they exist. And this, I think, is the greatest frustration to authors. We talk about the big name authors, and of course they get tons of publicity and full-page ads in the New York Times, whatever. And of course now we have the whole social networking opportunity. But so many books that are really fabulous get small printings, and nobody discovers them, or discovers them too late. And one of the things that I'm committed to is to finding talent, nurturing it, and making it work over a long period of time.
Don't you think that, first of all, I would take issue, maybe you've been lucky or probably skillful, but I'd say the 15 or so years I was at Random House, really in terms of worthwhile investments, I'd say 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 books were worthwhile, but they had a big list. It's a different,
it's a different situation. Right. I'll tell you a quick story. I was actually, I wrote a book coming out of college, out of Michigan. I had really, I'm not proud of this, but I had majored in the Michigan Daily, kind of minored in my studies, but fortunately met my wife there, so it was a pretty good run, and we're still together 45 years later, so I think it's worked out pretty well. But I had really been interested in writing and wrote a book. This was the late 60s, the Vietnam era, anti-war protest and so on. So I wrote a book called, co-wrote a book called Is the Library Burning, which was published by Random House. And I had so much fun promoting the book, going around, I went around the country and met so many interesting people and appeared on shows and stuff. And I said, I really want to come work here. And Bob Bernstein, who was the president of Random House, said, I'll give you some great advice. why don't you start in sales? You know editorial, but if you learn sales, then you've got kind of the complete package. So I did. I joined the company. They hired me in sales, and I go down to the first sales conference, and I'm very nervous and kind of popping off and wising off. And at one point, Bob Bernstein pulls me aside and says, you know, I don't think this is going to work out. I think we're going to have to fire you. I've been there like 4 days. I said, oh my God, you can't do this. My wife was pregnant. We'd been living in San Francisco. She was moving east. We were stone broke, and I said, you've got to give me another chance. I mean, this is not fair. I know I probably haven't acted properly or whatever, but I've only been here, 4 days a week, whatever. Give me another chance. I'm pleading for my life here. So what they do is they give me a little package to sell, a little color brochure of beginner books, the Dr. Seuss books and the Berenstain Bears, and they send me out to New Jersey to see how many accounts I can open up. And there was this very crusty salesman who was covering New Jersey, and he said to me, Kirshbaum, forget it. There's no accounts out there. I got them covered. Believe me, I got them covered. So this is my life is on the line here, folks. So I go out to New Jersey. They rented me a car, and I open up. I am so desperate. I open up in about 3 weeks 49 accounts. I could still name each one, and I come back. I mean, with a sheaf of orders, like very thick sheaf of orders. And the salesman says, this is impossible. I got to check this out. He checks it out. It turns out I had opened these accounts. They were viable. In those days, there were a lot of small toy stores and, sort of gift kiosks, sort of tiny hallmarks. And I had just gone up and down streets throughout cities and major cities of New Jersey and opened them up. So I kept my job. And I stayed with Random House for 4 or 5 years, and then I went to Warner, which was then just a paperback company. But I'll never forget that feeling of being fired and thinking to myself, after 4 days, and I was an author there, for God's sake. But the book hadn't done all that well. If they thought I was John Grisham, they probably wouldn't have fired me.
That was probably.
In any case, I still sort of get shivers in the middle of the night thinking about that experience.
How many books will you have for the year? You have 2 lists or 3 lists? 2. And so it's fall, winter, and spring, summer, or something?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
2 6-month lists.
And how many books will there be all?
About 40. We're figuring somewhere between 40 and 50, somewhere between 3 and 4 books a month.
And how many, may I ask how many books you have signed up already for the next list?
Yeah, we have signed up for the spring list about 20, so we're just about full up. And then we're working now on next fall. So we'll hit it. I mean, we've gotten a great response. I know there have been criticisms of Amazon in the press and from some sources, but the agents have by and large been extremely excited about the fact that we can publish in a different way. They love the idea of the database, that we can actually reach readers directly, that we can use. Of course, all of you who are, I'm sure, Amazon customers know the suggestible idea. If you like X, you'll like Y. Will be the Y, and I think we're gonna show some really innovative marketing ideas to sell books in ways that they're not being sold right now.
What's the colophon going to be?
Well, we're still, right now, our books are being distributed by Harcourt Brace under the colophon of New Harvest. So we're open to suggestions, but right now we're just going with Amazon Publishing, but we will be distributing ourselves under the New Harvest colophon.
That's a fairly recent arrangement?
Yes,
is that right?
yeah, we're only 6 months old, so it's all recent.
Right. Can't be fired after 6 months. You got
No,
past the
I haven't
4
fired
days.
yet. I can always go back to New Jersey, I hope.
Going back, I'm obsessed with the notion of publishing statistics and my own experience with them both as a writer and a publisher. I remember our mutual acquaintance, if not friend, Jason Epstein, coming into my office when I first was at Random House and looking in the window and saying, "Am I really this fat?" And sort of like going like this. And I said, "No, Jason, don't you know that a flat surface is going to put 10 or 15 pounds on you?" And he said, "Really? Really?" He was very happy about that. So then he said, "For that, I'm going to give you a piece of wisdom." He said, "This is a casino in here." He said, "Don't make any mistake about it. It's a casino." And what you're saying, and what I tried to do, sometimes effectively, sometimes not, was try to take the element of pure luck out and try to actually think about what would work and what wouldn't work. I have to say, after 15 years, I came out most of the time thinking, except for the big ticket items like James Patterson, who made it, or a book by Tom Brokaw, which had a huge advance, that there was still a very strong casino aspect to what I was doing, that it was like gambling. And for instance, when you talked about making a preemptive offer, that's a gamble. You're saying, "Here's my money on the table, and I'm going to take it off if you don't get back to me." That's a strategy of betting. It's in a way.
Yeah.
And isn't that what you're doing? Isn't that what publishers do?
Yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it. I happen to like to gamble myself, by the way. Maybe I'm well suited for this. But, you know, if you love what you do, it's the old story. If you love what you do, the good things happen. There's no question. And I think we should, by the way, just talk a little bit about, for younger or starting off authors, how to get published.
Sure.
If you really love it, and if you believe in a book, you're going to be right some of the time. But there is an element. I wouldn't call it gambling as much as magic. You know, there's something about books. They just sort of take off at a certain point. The word of mouth kicks in, and all of a sudden, this thing is being talked about. It's become a real cultural artifact. I can remember when we published The Tipping Point, for example, and Malcolm Gladwell at that point was a young author working at the New Yorker. He had a following, but he certainly wasn't as well known as he is now. And you know, the book started to sell, and then I think it was President Clinton said something about reaching a tipping point.
I consider that the kind of luck aspect. It happened with me with a book called Amy and Isabel by Elizabeth Strout, who has taught
a wonderful
here,
book.
who has taught here. And I was pretty new. I took it to lunch. Someone from the Today Show asked me to go to lunch with her, so I said sure. And on the way out, Ann Godoff said to me, "Always take a book to lunch." I mean, I was so new, I didn't even hardly know that. So I picked up, which I loved, Amy and Isabel, and I gave it to Terry Schaefer, a producer. And lo and behold, the next thing, just by luck, the next thing is that Liz Strout is on the Today Show. And that's a kind of lightning bolt, just as the one you described.
Right.
And you can't predict those.
No, but I think the idea is if you are publishing books out of passion and not out of the sort of cynical financial model, if you really are publishing based on what you believe in, what your editors believe in, you're going to be right, and you have the right editors, obviously. And a good marketing group and a good publicity group and financial people who really understand the business. Our financial manager in New York is a children's book author, but also has worked at McKinsey and Harvard MBA, et cetera, but loves books too. I'm just a great believer that love conquers all in a way. Maybe I'm naive, but it's always worked for me. If you really believe in the book and you love it, and you get enough people around you to share your vision, it's got a good chance of working. And you know, you take the gambling element. It's there because let's face it, there are only X number of slots on the bestseller list. There are millions of titles being published, or 400,000, I think, something like that per year, and millions of titles in our database. But it's amazing, especially now with this long tail, how many titles keep going and build audiences over time as people discover them. So a good title will rise to the surface.
Yeah, I wish I had that same conviction. I'd say I share about half of it. I mean, I'm with you halfway, and the other
That's
half.
what makes horse racing, right?
Well, no, but I mean, you can pick up books that. And when I cleared out my parents' bookshelves, I found books that I'd never heard of that were just amazing, and that never did very well.
Yeah.
And that seemed like a shame. there are too many books, it seems to me, and there are not as many people who are publishing as selectively and passionately as the way you describe your work, and I think that's maybe one of the problems.
Mhm.
You wanted to talk about how people get published.
Yes.
I think we should do that,
Great.
particularly in view of electronic publishing and self-publishing.
Sure.
You're in a good position to talk about
First of all, I'm a huge fan of self-publishing. I say to all of you, each and every one, if you are writing a book and first choice is to find an agent, and I'll get to that in a minute. But second choice would be to put it up. There are a number of, we have Kindle Direct Publishing, and Nook has,
Pubbit.
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 There are a number of authors. What's that? The one in Indianapolis, Authors Unlimited. You can find them on Google, whatever. I think the stigma that used to exist with respect to self-publishing has really dissipated, because there are a lot of good books that are being self-published, and the publishers, the big publishers today, the commercial publishers, are looking to see what books are doing well as self-published books. I know we just bought a wonderful young adult book called Angel Fall, which was done very, very well as a Kindle title, and also as a Nook title. So, this is a great way to get started. We also have a program called Singles, which is not a dating service. It's shorter pieces. If you have a nonfiction idea, but it's only 20,000 words, that's the kind of place that it can go. So more and more, I see this being a way for writers that are getting started or have never been published to start. In a way, it's replacing some of the more academic literary journals, because this is an opportunity to get this book out there. And then, of course, the publicity of it becomes up to you. And you have to do a lot of the self-marketing to make it work, but you have to do that anyway. Even if you were published by a big publisher, you will find that you still have to do a lot of the marketing yourself. So this is a great way I think, to get started. In terms of finding an agent, what I recommend is that you go into bookstores and you look in the acknowledgments and see books that you really admire. And you look into the acknowledgments, and usually the author will thank their agent. And there's no better way to start a letter to an agent than to say, legitimately, you have to buy the book and read it. But, I just read XYZ, and I saw they said wonderful things about you, and I wondered if you would take a look at what I have. Then you get to I'll just do this very quickly, you get to a proposal stage, which can be, I believe shorter is better. 5 pages, do it, and in which you describe what the book is, maybe the brief descriptions of each chapter, so you get some sense of the development of it. If it's fiction, it doesn't have to be pages and pages of plot. Give us the, as I sort of tried to do with Wooden Floor, just give us the kind of the basic, what's the hook, the MacGuffin, as we say, what's the premise that's going to make this book work, that you're working off of. And then, very important, the competition. With fiction, it's a little harder to do, and don't compare yourself to, I'm overusing John Grisham, but compare, if it's fiction, look at some first novels that have worked well, and say, this, I think mine has a similar sensibility. If it's nonfiction, then you can be a little more specific. If it's a business book, you compare it, and don't just compare it to good to great. Compare it to business books that might fit the same profile as your book. Very important, I think, for agents as well as ultimately the publishers to know what they're going to be competing with if they buy your book. And the last thing is to think about all the way through the process. When you're writing your proposal, think as if you are doing the jacket copy. Study jacket copy. You can go into a bookstore and just read to get a sense of how publishers, in a sense, describe different books. And so your proposal should have some element of that. It doesn't have to be exactly jacket copy, but it should have that same kind of intensity and, if you will, enchantment that is going to get people excited about your book. Think about, not only are editors going to look at this proposal, hopefully, I mean, agents are going to look at it, then hopefully editors are going to look at it, and also the marketing people and publicity people are going to look at it. How am I appealing to all of them? Am I laying out this case in a very exciting way? And shorter is better. And it does not have to be 100 pages. And then the object of the game, you might enclose, I always recommend enclosing or attaching 2 chapters, 2 or 3 chapters. That gives a feel for the book. Usually if it's a nonfiction, an introduction, plus a couple of chapters. If it doesn't have an introduction as a novel, it very well might not. The first couple of chapters, make those good, and get people engaged in that book from the first page. Just as you as readers know what engages you, use that same tool to engage others.
This is a business of selling, and I think what a lot of young writers don't understand. I mean, it's a business of culture too. That's the problem with publishing, in my opinion, is that it's a 2 tectonic plates grinding against each other. You have to serve the company that you work for and for yourself and financially, but you also are hoping to serve the life of letters of your community, and sometimes they kind of rub against each other. But I just want to say I wrote a humor piece called Flap Rules about flap copy.
Flap copy.
And you just Google it, you'll find it. The first one was, you have to use the word stunning unless you've written a history of the stun gun, in which case maybe you shouldn't. I think we should probably open it up to some questions from our audience if it's the right time. Is it about right?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Anyone?
Well, you mentioned self-publishing and you love it and everything. And my question is, with all the people that are self-publishing today, and as writers here, a lot of us are obviously readers, how will the reader be able to find that good book? How will they be able to separate the wheat from the chaff?
Yeah. Well, this is where I think social networking comes in. If you have to blog, tweet, whatever to get known. You have to get every one of your friends and family members to read the book and then give it to others to start the ball rolling. And you have to go around locally to start with and give talks if you can. Do your own publicity. Maybe even pay for an ad, a small ad in a local, like here, if it were here, dance papers or something. Start to get the book going. And of course, also, I recommend going into bookstores as well, and we have some copies printed up. I mean, we at Amazon we have a division called Create Space, which does the actual physical print-on-demand books. I would take some copies, physical copies in, and see if the bookstore would put a few on the counter or in a prominent position. It's because you're a local author, and you just sort of build from there. It's amazing to me how many of these titles do get discovered, though. I realize there are thousands of them, but it's good, and then you've got a physical book to show people, which I think is very valuable. And it builds from there. But the blogging part of it, I think if you can, especially nonfiction, obviously really translates directly. If you're writing about motherhood or whether or not to have children or whatever, there are, as you know, thousands and thousands of blogs, and you've got to get on them and get engaged in conversation, get your name known. Fiction is a little harder, but there's Goodreads, and there are many literary blogs now, and you've got to get on them. If you really want it badly enough, I always like to say this because I do speak to a lot of writers groups and publishing groups, publishing intern groups, and so on. I always say if you want it badly enough, you can make it happen. it really comes down to desire, because I would bet you that 90% of the people in this room can be published if they want to be. If they're willing to work at it, and they find the right venue, and they find and connect at some point with the right editor, it can happen. But you really got to want it and devote the time to it.
See someone else? I hope. Yeah.
Do you think Amazon Publishing is going to have room for literature aimed at younger children, like picture books or middle grade books?
Yes, we have a children's division. We just bought a company called Marshall Cavendish, which is a very, very fine publisher, small publisher of quality books. Lots of awards, mostly through library sales. And we have been, I was just in Bologna at the Children's Book Fair, which was a lot of fun. Good books, good pasta, not a bad combination. They really do, the Italians, they really got the handle over there. They don't need the 4-hour chef. They've already got it. They've got the 1,000-year chef. The University of Bologna, I think, is the oldest university in the world. Dan and I matriculated there in 1068, I believe. But I like to say, right after the Peloponnesian War.
I thought it was the war, but I thought it was
The War with the Roses?
No, I'm younger. I must be, because it was the War of 1812.
I see. Sometimes I address these young publishing groups, and I start talking about the Vietnam War, and I see these. Well, it was Peloponnesian, World War I, World War II, Vietnam. That's kind of the history of it. And, oh yeah, now we got it. We are publishing children's books. We're very, very much looking for middle grade. Those I think there's a kind of a hole in that market. Young adult, of course, is right now on a crest because of the dystopian novels. Hunger Games has, lifted all the boats, so to speak, and I think the kids area is really exciting because we're seeing tremendous crossover. What's fascinating about this is so-called young adult literature, which tends to run, I think, from like 12 to 18. The New York Times says 14 to 18, but I think it actually starts a little younger, especially with Harry Potter and Hunger Games and so on, is adults are coming to these books and finding, let's face it, The Hunger Games is a great read, whether you're 12 or you're 112. It's just a fabulous book, or a trilogy. And so we're seeing a lot of crossover where adults are coming to these books because they love the stories and they love the characters, and it's like they just love good books, and these are delivering. So we are very interested in that area. I think it's going to be a huge success. If you're doing a picture book, the only piece of advice I give you is it is not necessary to illustrate it. Sometimes a bad illustration does not help. If you've got, if you happen to have a spouse or a significant other that's a commercial artist, that's one thing. And if you can find somebody to illustrate it that gives, do a couple of tissues that would sort of give the idea, that's fine. But don't feel compelled. Just remember, picture books are very short. They can be 500 to 1,000 words. Don't overwrite, and you just send the text, and you can give some idea of but let the editors know how to imagine what the art would look like. Come up with a great idea, and that's what publishers want to see. But I definitely think chapter books and middle grade books are an area that are that's next, in a sense. It's always been there, but it's the primed for growth. And you don't have to write a dystopian novel, which is what everybody, or trilogy, which is what everybody seems to be doing right now.
Also, it doesn't hurt in 2 or 3 cases that are prominent right now: Hunger Games, Game of Thrones, and Twilight Saga. There's this, I hate to use a word from the 90s, synergy of popular cultural artifacts that sort of play into each other. My wife is reading Game of Thrones right now,
right,
because of the television series.
Sure, of course.
And so it does go back and forth. Yeah.
I'm not a writer, but living around writers for a long time, there's been a lot of bemoaning of the end of sort of mid-list, and I wonder if the economics around Amazon create an opportunity for, say, publishing smaller runs for more niche audiences economically that would benefit?
Yeah, well, that's a very good point. We are definitely looking for books that might fit a niche that we can build out. We used to try to design a circular order form in order to avoid the idea of a top, a middle, and a bottom. That didn't work out too well. But there's no question that we are looking for books that show talent, but maybe they're not quite ready for prime time yet, but we can develop it with the author and go from there. You know, midlist, where midlist will work the best is where it has a strong niche following. If it's, you know, obviously if it's in the self-help area, if it's a particular kind of raising orchids or something.
Or how to finish a wood floor.
Yeah, or how to finish a wood floor, how not to spill red wine on the polyurethane.
Could I follow up on that? Is there something different about the economics of Amazon versus traditional publishing houses? I haven't heard anybody talk about that.
Well, the one thing we do feel we offer, of course, is our access, I mean, through us to our database and to the store, to our website or store as we call it. Other publishers make available, you know, we are, I think, the largest bookseller in the world now, and you know, all thousands of publishers avail themselves of many of these same tools. But I think we feel that because we do have more direct access as an in-house company to the database, that we can take a book and expose it to readers that have read or have bought similar books of similar interest or similar novel sensibility, and that's a good way to launch a book. You know, I don't like to think in terms of midlist. Every book that we buy, because we're only publishing 4 a month, is going to be special as far as we're concerned. Somebody in our house, one of our editors really loves this book, and others support it, and the marketing people are trying to figure out how do we find the avenue to make the book work. So yes, you know, we're not just looking top of the list kind of books. We're looking for books that are really interesting and that can, with authors that have long-term potential.
And also books that may have a long tail.
And a long tail, right.
They
don't have to be the devil to have a long tail.
Maybe we'll do 1 or 2 more questions, and then as we mingle, people can come up
Sure.
and attack
Okay.
you guys
Mr. Ganane. Go ahead.
Sorry. Besides distributing your books electronically and through the Amazon sales facilities, you mentioned that you have a distribution arm that could be hardcore-based. You're going to physically produce books that will be sold to the trade as well.
Right. Yes, yeah. Did you all hear that? There's a question about physical. What, in addition to the electronic distribution, is there going to be physical book distribution? And the answer is yes. Houghton Mifflin, which is a very, very fine publisher.
My publisher.
Next book. Very, very wonderful company based in Boston and New York, long tradition, and they will be distributing our books to bookstores. So we are very interested, obviously, in selling to everybody. And libraries, by the way, our book distribution to libraries is going to be a very important part of our mix, too, because that's where a lot of books get started, is in libraries where people can start to read it and talk about it and build a base of an audience.
One more.
Okay.
I was wondering, with the downloading in the Kindle now and the publishing on demand, how is that a game changer in terms, or if it is it, in terms of like newer writers? Because you don't have to, and I don't know that much about the economic side of publishing, but you're not committing yourself to publishing 1,000, 10,000, whatever it is, copies.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Did you all hear that? We are going to be doing, in addition to the books that we are doing both electronically and physically, we're going to be doing a certain number of ebooks only. And those are going to be the discovery books that I think you're talking about, where we can take, because it is relatively cheap in terms of the process, to get an electronic book up. As a self-published author, you can put a book up in about an hour. I mean, literally in the same day. But our process is a little bit more attenuated because we want to put some promotion behind it. We want to do some marketing. We want to do some social networking. But we are definitely going to use the ebook format as a vehicle for discovering talent. We see that as a really great opportunity because we don't have to make the huge investment in printing books, although they will be available as print on demand, so that there will be, on our website, they will be offered both electronically and as paperbacks. This book that I mentioned before, Jeff, the Lonely Guy, that is essentially an ebook, but it also does have a print component, which is the print on demand. So you can buy it either as a digital book or as a physical book. And I'm glad you brought that up, because this is one of the great things about the electronic vehicle is it's fast. You can get it out there. We can build audiences, and then if the book starts to work, we can then do the print edition later. The print gestation period is typically can be 9 months, a year or more from the time that the author turns in the accepted manuscript. This, with an ebook, you can get it up very, very quickly, and we want to do that as a way of discovering and nurturing new talent.
I think probably that's about as much as we can talk about formally, and I want to thank you for listening and being engaged. For jitneying out here. I know he has to leave early in the morning, so I'm particularly grateful that he took this time out, and Bob and Susie and all the people who always make this kind of event so welcoming and so useful. Thank you very much.
Dan has a book for sale over there, and there are copies of the new TSR also.
Be sure to buy Dan's book if you really want to learn how to conversation.